Hello, 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 New Haven, and welcome back to Arts Respond on WNHHLP 103.5 FM, New Haven. I'm your host, Lucy Gellman, and today I'm really excited to be here with Jamal Robinson and Oren Ferris of the Change in the Air Festival happening October 14th from noon to 5 p.m. at Bear's Smokehouse in New Haven. We're going to get into the whole festival. We're going to get into some backstories and storytelling because you know that I love to get into the Wayback Machine and talk to folks about how they got bitten by the artistic bug, and in this case, the brewing bug, which I put that into artistry. I don't know if both of you do.
Yeah, I think
Uh,
any brewer would agree
yeah,
with that.
yeah. I think there's definitely an artistry and certainly like an alchemy to brewing beer. So first of all, I would love Jamal to ask you, we have a very general listenership. Some folks may already be familiar with the Change in the Air Festival, but a lot of folks coming to this interview may not be. And so I'm wondering if you can just provide like a, sort of your 2 minute or longer or shorter. Um, what is the festival for folks who haven't come to it? And then we'll talk about why it's really, really important.
Sure. So the festival is a beer festival, kind of at the roots of it. It is the largest fundraiser for our African American Brewer Scholarship that was established by New England Brewing Company in collaboration with Sacred Heart University. But it also is, the means of the scholarship being to diversify who's working in the industry. The festival is meant to not just be a fundraiser, but to also be a new space to help diversify who's drinking craft beer and what the spaces in which we drink craft beer look and feel like.
And I'm wondering if you can talk a little bit about the industry. So I was amazed when I think you and I first spoke at the Seeing Sounds Festival, which Trey Moore, shout out to Trey, organized earlier this year. And I was amazed because just off the top of your head, you were like, let me tell you some statistics about the craft brewing industry. And I hadn't realized one, that it was such a huge industry, but two, and maybe I should absolutely not have been surprised by this, but that it is still so dominated by white folks and especially like cisgender heterosexual white men.
Yeah, absolutely. Craft beer represents 85 plus $1 billion in America right now in terms of an economic impact. And that's just not just who's drinking beer, but also through, the food trucks that are at these breweries, the artists that are doing the labels and all the other manufacturing aspects that go into that. But then craft beer really only represents 15% of beer. So when we talk about like this huge economic impact that the beverage industry, that beer has specifically, and then Black folks represent less than 1% of that. People of color represent less than 5% of that in terms of employment or ownership. There's a huge disparity through like what America looks like, and this is one of several industries that really need a focus on diversity as a whole.
And do you think part of that, and Oren, feel free to hop in as well. Do you think part of that is how craft beer has been like marketed as well? Because I feel like craft beer wasn't a thing. So I'm in my 30s, and when I was growing up in Detroit, I don't feel like craft beer was a thing. I don't know, maybe it was, maybe I just wasn't aware of it.
Yeah, I
Uh,
mean, those were the early days of craft beer. I think over the last 15 years or so, you've really seen craft beer like boom into this thing that it is now. But in the early, late 80s, late 70s to through the 80s and 90s, the original craft beer drinkers, if you will, were people with disposable income, people who had maybe traveled overseas and had tried, other European beers, or certainly people with like a basic understanding of like brewing science and to start home brewing and being able to buy homebrew kits. And if we know anything about the early 80s and 90s, those were not people of color that were in positions to fit those demographics. So especially the industry itself was marketed specifically to white males and has always kind of been built that way. And I think, as a whole craft industry, when I think of all the relationships I've had, people that I've met, it's a very welcoming, open-minded space for the most part. But you've got this wheel that's kind of been built for a specific demographic, not just for how we market craft beer, but also the access into the industry is kind of in a specific way that Black folks and people of color are not really inherently and organically in those positions to find themselves in a positions to transition into the industry. So then, without being very intentional about breaking the wheel and kind of rebuilding it or changing how people get into the industry, or what access looks like, or what the spaces look and feel like, then you're really going to keep the same cycle, even if you've got a bunch of really, really great people in the space.
Absolutely. So let's talk about the festival, and I should say for listeners who don't know or aren't familiar with it, it's part of the Change in the Air Foundation. So this is part of a greater umbrella organization with a greater mission. And I'm wondering if you can talk about like that change work and also how that work can be fun.
Yeah, I've always said, and anyone I've ever hired or any presentation I've given in terms of sales, I live in the sales and marketing world in the beer industry. I'm not a brewer, but we're selling beer. If we can't have some fun doing this, we're messing up somewhere along the line. So I think it has been fun, but the foundation as a whole is a focused with a group of us trying to tackle this aspect of diversifying the industry from multiple angles, and trying to bring in people and entities that foster that. And it's also about like bringing community together and bringing Black and Brown community in a place in a way that they can engage with craft beer in a way that is comfortable and familiar, and feels approachable, and not, out of the element of what we already like to do as a culture and as a people.
And when did this become also a discussion about, okay, we're trying to do this, like systems change work is hard, right? And so at some point, I assume that this became a discussion like, hey, we are going to get together and be the CT Brewers Guild African American Brewing Scholarship, or we're going to have this scholarship specifically for folks who are interested in brewing, have historically been boxed out of the brewing industry for a number of reasons. And it's a really cool collaboration. It's between NEBCO, New England Brewing Co., which we almost had in New Haven, but that's a different episode of the show, and I'm not going to talk about. I'm a little bit bitter, but I'm not going to talk about it right now. And the Connecticut Brewers Guild, and then of course Sacred Heart University, which you mentioned.
Yeah, it started. The scholarships themselves started here at NEBCO back in 2020. At the height of all the protests and everything going on, we looked at ourselves as a company. I looked at myself individually as a Black man in this industry, going on 20 years now in this industry, and feeling like there's not a lot of people that look like me in this space. And what does that mean? We've done a lot for, as a company, New England Brewing. Part of our ethos is giving back to community. But we didn't have anything built specifically for Black community when we talk about that. So it was about us as a team kind of being like, all right, what can we do to kind of make an impact, and be thought leaders and intentional about making some change here, not just for Black community, but also how that affects our industry. And that's where we came up with the scholarship. Sacred Heart had launched their brewing science program. We thought, man, it would be a great way to provide equitable access into the industry if we created an actual scholarship, which brought us down the rabbit hole of how to create scholarships and what that really means. So there's the two types. There's the annual scholarship that's, an entity would just pay for every year. And there's an endowment fund where you raise enough money, you put it into an account, the interest off of that account would spin off and then pay for, parts of the scholarship. The Brewing Science program at Sacred Heart is a 15-month-long program. It's 11-month-long program. It's $15,000. So for us, it was about, all right, if we're going to ask people of color or try to engage people of color to switch over to this industry, $15,000 is a real number.
That's a lot of money.
Yeah. Not to mention the time and energy, and Oren can speak to it, the time and energy that it takes to really actually go through this class. It's designed so that you can still have a full-time job while doing it, but it's still no small task to take that on, to pass the course. So if we really want to provide that, it was important to us that we provided a full ride for the program. And that meant two things. It meant we created an annual scholarship and an endowed scholarship, because an endowed scholarship for that amount of money would be $250,000, $250,000 in order to have enough interest to spin off to pay in perpetuity. So we put a goal of 5 years on the table to raise that money in 5 years, but we didn't want to wait 5 years before we started making impact, putting people through this program. So we launched our annual scholarship at the same time as we kind of established the endowed scholarship. And I put the foundation together as a means to take the weight of this initiative and this movement off of just being a NEBCO lift to being an industry lift, because I think it's important for people coming into this industry for the first time, especially Black and brown folks, to not feel like this is something that most of the industry doesn't really want. It's something that the industry understands and is working towards. So it was important to me to try and gather people from different aspects of this industry and even outside the industry to join this kind of committee that I put together. And the committee eventually evolved into a nonprofit 501c3 that kind of brought us to where we are today.
And Oren, I want to bring you into this and
Sure.
talk about, so you're currently a professional brewer at Athletic Brewing Company. And before we were on, I was just singing Athletics praises. And Jamal, I can sing NEBCO's praises all day too. Like just so you know, I'm an equal opportunity. I don't know, whatever the opposite of an offender is. Supporter, champion, cheerleader. Yeah, I will cheer both of you on all day. But you were also one of the first scholarship recipients. And so I want to talk about that. And then I love a good backstory. So I want to jump into how you got interested in brewing as well. But tell me specifically, what this means to be one of the first scholarship recipients. You now also sit on the board of the Change in the Air Foundation. And yeah, let's start there. I have like
I
a
will
million
say,
questions.
sure. I'll start by saying this has been a great opportunity and a blessing for me to expand my role in craft beer and just getting a better grasp on making beer as a whole. I started working at a brewery up in Hartford, Hog River. Initially, I just started in the tap room, which gradually got me working more into the back of the house, helping out with canning and some of the production work. And this started in 2019. From there, I found out about the scholarship through visiting NEBCO and other respective entities. They were promoting the program, so I just took kind of a leap of faith in signing up one for the program. And initially, it was just like I would foot the bill to pay for the program, just because I seen an opportunity for myself working in the industry. I initially got started with Hog River. I was working in insurance, and I wanted to kind of change it up. So I started working for the beer garden, and from there they brought me on, and that just kind of piqued my interest more. So I seen an opportunity for me to kind of take a step further in just the production that I was doing at Hog River and actually get some professional experience and education under my belt. From there, the program has been great. Jamal's been awesome. Just the community that is based around the program. Like Sacred Heart runs the education of the program, but all of the teachers and educators throughout the program are professionals in the industry who either work at a brewery or own a brewery. So we're getting firsthand experience from people not only in our area, but people who have actually proof of concept of, operating in this space. So it's been a great opportunity for me to learn and engage and really build a community of my own with these folks.
And what is it about brew? I think brewing is so freaking cool. What is it about the actual, because like there's art to it, there's science, there's alchemy, and it's connecting you to this history that is like millennia old, right?
For sure. I would assimilate it to almost cooking. Like it's a tradition passed down hand to hand, and it's always kind of pushed the bounds of, experimentation, but also taste and flavors, not only from your own palate, but from cultural palettes in the different regions. You can kind of bring that all together and make a great product. Sometimes, it's kind of off the wall and experimental, or you could, really delve into the history and tradition of, a regional flavor or style and kind of bring that to light and shed light on, not only that region, but the style and really kind of make it your own.
I actually want to talk about that. So just if you're just joining us here on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. This is Arts Respond. I'm Lucy Gellman, and today I'm here with Jamal Robinson and Oren Ferris talking about the Change in the Air Festival coming up on October 14th from 12 to 5 p.m. at Bear's Smokehouse. I think it's Bear's Smokehouse and Barbecue. I always get the title a little different, but it's sort of the Mill River district of New Haven. And I actually want to talk about that because one thing that I find really fun about craft beer and craft brewing is there are always, and I think increasingly, like flavors that maybe you weren't expecting. So I feel like IPAs had a moment. Maybe they're just always having a moment. They've had a moment for centuries. They're never going to go away, even if you're not super into them. But as more Black brewers have entered the field, I'm curious, if both of you have seen and experienced like more, you used the term, I think, cultural palette, or in sort of more references that were not existent in the field of craft beer coming in beforehand.
Yeah, I would definitely say there's been a lot more of a change in flavors. Like initially getting into craft beer, I was a West Coast IPA drinker. Lagunitas was one of my favorite. Then Blue Point, shout out to Blue Point. But they were in Magic Hat, of course. Those were kind of the initial starts for me, and then kind of New England style IPAs blew up, and they've kind of had their run. I would say that's where I really started, and then as of lately, I've kind of transitioned to more in traditional styles of beer, more lagers from the European region, kind of all over, especially Schwarzbiers, which are just like a dark lager, which I really enjoy. So I would say that's been kind of my start, but with more uh, black and brown breweries coming along, you see more of those traditional flavors and references. Actually, a classmate of mine, he's a home brewer, and he brings a lot of his cultural influences of flavors into his beer. And I really appreciate just how the growth of, brewers coming in and bringing their own flavor palettes in and how they can assimilate that to a finished product and how it's received by the community is really great.
I think that's true. Jamal, do you want to jump in?
Yeah, I think I couldn't have said it better myself. I think it's a reaction when a culture gets a hold of anything. It's just pretty instinctive for a culture to then, put its influence into whatever that thing is. So when we talk about beer, whether it's taken on by Caribbeans or Puerto Ricans or Africans, the same way we do with food and cuisine is the same influences we're going to impart into beer. So you're going to see those familiar flavors, whether it's mango, whether it's guava, whether it's coconut, and these flavors that are kind of traditional to us. Then that's just an organic thing. And a great thing about the festival and the movement is not just about trying to take what is now a white dominated industry and just get a bunch of Black and brown folks drinking beer. It's about giving the opportunity to take some ownership and evolve what the scene and the culture looks like as a whole from the perspective of different cultures and not just one.
I'm also really interested about the dialogue that is happening that both of you have experienced and been part of, because I think about this when I love reading restaurant reviews, but sometimes I get really PO'd because I feel like the writers of the reviews sometimes assume that like white is the default, which like we're in a country that was cultivated by stolen people after land was also stolen, right? So white has never been the default in this place, and for a lot of people, even the idea of the United States is totally arbitrary. And so, have you experienced situations in which folks assume that like either white brewers or flavors that maybe they associate with white folks or predominantly white cultures? You mentioned or in like beers from Germany, and I think Germany and Europe, and that tradition. And I think there's some assumption that that's also like white, which is absurd because it's not just white people in Europe. Yeah, but yeah, I guess I'm curious about the dialogues that have been happening and whether you've seen a productive shift in the language.
I think it's progressing in that direction, like just understanding that there are, people outside of just, what you assume to be in this space creating a product, that there are more folks that are bringing, their own flavors and styles to it. But I would, as far as like the assumptions based off of, minority versus white, I would say it comes more so on the production side. Like, for instance, for me to speak up and say that I'm a brewer and be like, oh, you brew? You know what I mean? It's just the assumption that only, you know, these certain types of people make these kinds of products, whereas like, no, you know what I mean? Like, and that's what kind of drove me to the program, is to kind of differentiate myself, to say that, not only do I brew, but I've been formally educated in this space, and I actually, have an understanding of how, the production and formulation of this product is made. So I think that's, a progressive change coming in this space, just understanding that, there are more than just, one type of people making this product. And, to just kind of broaden your horizons, to say that, there are, we can, anybody can do anything, you know what I mean, as much as you want to, but it just takes understanding that, you know it can be done, and that there are people in here, looking to make strides in doing these things. And back to what you mentioned as far as just regional creations. I actually recently read an article that spoke to beer being produced in Africa, and it was actually made with fermenting bananas. So I found that interesting, and it actually dates it. It's said to predate the beer that was made in, Germany and Europe as well. So I think there are some facts out there that aren't, readily available, that do speak to the creation of these products outside of just one specific region.
Yes, absolutely. Yes. I would also love to read that article. I don't know where it was, but I would love to read that article. It sounds amazing.
I'll,
Um,
I'll have to find it and pass that along to you.
yeah, thank you. So I want to talk about the festival itself, which is coming up on October 14th. So it's not just a beer festival for folks who are listening. It's brews, beats, eats, and art walk and marketplace. So Jamal, this is taking a really intersectional approach to craft brewing. And I would love to talk about that. It also sounds like a really fun approach, right? Um, but
Yeah,
but I want to talk about that because it's not just like you can go and drink some beer and get some good food, which sounds like a great time, by the way. But you can go, you can listen to some great music, you can buy some art, you can check out, I assume, small Black-owned businesses, which like that is really great. And I will say, as a New Havener, I'm really proud of how many Black-owned businesses we have in both the city and the state more widely.
yeah. I think, from the bones of the festival, yes, it's a beer festival, but it was important for us to create, a cultural festival and an event that, again, that Black and Brown community and culture can engage with craft beer in a comfortable setting. So we wanted to create an event that Black and Brown folks would want to be to, like an event that Orrin and I would want to actually go to and be at, built around our cultures and celebrating and highlighting our cultures, and not just using it as a trope to kind of draw in people of color. So all the music, our DJs and our bands are Black and Brown. All of our vendors, we have 32 brewery signeries and bourbon signed up for the festival. But we also have, and there's not a lot of Black-owned breweries. We have two Black-owned breweries in Connecticut, Rhythm Brewing and Best Friends Lunch, will both be at the festival. We have 1970 something's a Black-owned bourbon out of Connecticut that will also be at the festival this year. But it's also about highlighting the other parts of Black and Brown community. So especially art, when you look at any can of beer, the art is a huge aspect of what brings the liquid inside that can to life in a presentable way. So we have 15 Black and Brown artists that will be at the festival displaying their art and selling their art. And for us, we look at them as a part of what makes the festival real. So this year we're excited about having enough grant money and sponsorships to be able to pay all the visual artists to just to be there and vend their art, and not just ask them to come be a part of our festival, but actually paying them for their time, because artists don't get the shake that they should get, and the presentation they should get. We'll have 4 live murals happening at the festival this year as well. So like to be immersed in art being created specifically around the festival is just an awesome experience. And those are all Black and brown artists as well. And then another 30 Black and brown vendors in terms of businesses, from crafts to food goods to anything. And then on top of that, we've got half a dozen Black and brown food vendors, everything from Caribbean to African and Latin diaspora, all mixed into that. So, and then we also don't segregate the aspects of the festival. So you've got a brewery next to an artist, next to a vendor, next to a food vendor, next to another brewery, which like forces this mentality of collaboration and conversation and community as a whole. We're looking to bring everyone together in a way so that you sample a beer, you're instinctively drawn to who's at the next booth. But then also having, a brewer maybe talking to an artist that they wouldn't have had an opportunity to have a conversation before, and bringing that economic impact into a place that creates and provides opportunity as well. So we're launching today actually a collaboration with Lawson's Brewery up in Vermont, and DJ Dooley, a New Haven legend, is the one that did the art for the can itself. So, and he's an artist. He's been a DJ at our festival, but he's also an artist vending art at the festival as well. So it's about this like full circle aspect of not just providing opportunity and exposure, but trying to create opportunity and foster conversation and build real relationships between it all.
And you've also been building those bridges in New Haven. So I know I mentioned the Seeing Sounds Festival earlier. Tell me about that. So Change in the Air Festival is now in its 3rd year. I should know this off the top of my head.
Yeah,
3rd year.
Our 3rd year.
Yeah, time feels like really porous right now, at least
Yeah,
for me.
especially
I
we
think
launched the festival the first year during COVID. So that was
right.
a crazy year in general.
Right. And I think COVID did something to all of our heads.
Yeah.
So
That's
tell
fair.
me about, building those bridges. And Oren, I would also love to hear from you, because you are in a different place professionally now than you were, when this began.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good.
No, I was gonna say absolutely. Like, the Change in the Air Festival has been, a great opportunity and experience for me. Just starting from being a vendor, being there on behalf of a vendor, respectively Hog River. They're representing them, but just to be within the community of the event, I really saw the benefit of all these folks coming together, engaging, and really building the bridges. Like Jamal has mentioned, it's been a great run. I'm looking forward to being kind of on the other side this year, being on the board and just really helping out and supporting not only the vendors but all of our respective board members, and really putting on a great event for everyone.
Yeah, and those relationships are huge, because we talked about as a board this year that it's one thing when we throw a festival one day a year, we're really trying to make change on a level that is more than just trying to get people to sign up for the scholarship. It's also about really we have to provide opportunity for a Black and brown culture to sample craft beer in ways that make sense. So that means bringing craft beer into Black and brown communities. So that means collaborating with people who are already doing dope events in the city and around the city, and trying to bring value to their event by part of our thing was kind of doing these Change in the Air pop-up beer gardens at these events, where we bring craft beer into that space and sample it in a space that the Black and brown folks are already comfortable in, already doing what they're doing, already having an event that's built around us, and then just providing free, easy access to trying a bunch of things that maybe they wouldn't have tried before. And that's the huge part of it. Craft beer got huge because of exposure, because of it was exposed to white folks and presented and available. Like craft beer currently doesn't really exist in Black and brown communities. It's not at our stores and at our places that we traditionally hang out in or eat at or go to. So if we want to make some real change, we got to meet people where they are. We got to be thoughtful and intentional about that. So collaborations like Seeing Sounds. Shout out to Trey, threw an amazing event. We were proud to be a part of that and collaborated with that in bringing what we do to his already very successful event. But then other collaborations like Wind Down CT, and we're actually working with the city of New Haven now, and to do what we're calling Cedar Park as a pop-up beer garden downtown New Haven that is a change in the air beer garden space. And the idea of that being our first event being 2 weeks before our festival, that'll be September 30th. That's a free event downtown New Haven in Pitkin Plaza and the corner lot that connects Pitkin Plaza. So there's about, call it almost 9,000 square foot space there that we'll be kind of taking over and turning into this pop-up event, mini Change in the Air, where it'll be very similar aspects to what we have in Change in the Air, giving people a taste of what they could get when they buy tickets to Change in the Air. We'll have 6 breweries there sampling beers. We'll have local artists, we'll have local vendors, we'll have live music and DJs, and we'll kind of take over this space downtown with the idea that this is a bit of a proof of concept and that give us the time and energy to plan for next year to become a seasonal space for next summer that pops up kind of every weekend. Originally, the idea was like, this would be a great space for a beer garden, and in some great conversations, we were able to pivot them from going to just a beer garden, which would be successful, pops up in every other city around the country, but is a pretty traditionally white space. And I don't think New Haven needs another one of those. So this was about give us the opportunity as a foundation to collaborate with other Black and Brown leaders to create a collaborative space to do the beer garden concept, but do it in a way that provides diversity and equity for downtown New Haven in a cool and unique way. So we're excited about that. And that's just about making sure that what we do one day a year as a festival isn't one day a year, that it's residual and long term.
And I will say shout out to Adrian Jefferson with the Department of Arts, Culture, and Tourism, which lives under economic development for the city. I know that what you're describing is like 99.99%. When you say the city, it's like 99% Adrian.
Yeah.
And yeah, and she is just a mover and a shaker and an incredible person. And we're really, really lucky to have her in New Haven. For both of you, I'm curious, and maybe you don't get pushback around craft beer because this is the world that you're so in already. But I'm curious if you've had discussions where you've had to like present an argument for craft beer on behalf of craft beer, because I know occasionally folks have said to me like that's fancy, or sour beers are a whole other thing, and maybe we'll leave that out of this because often people will say to me, well, that's girly beer, so maybe we won't even touch that.
But I will say,
yeah,
sorry, I would say that
don't apologize.
It's all about it's largely about exposure and people getting the opportunity to see that it is more. It's one thing when you're just kind of looking from the outside and you're like, beer is beer. But when I started in craft beer, I was doing beer fest and I was working for small breweries. Nobody was drinking craft beer. So I was educating white folks back then on why craft beer is cool and why it's different and why it's not just Bud Light. And then once people got exposed to it, and more people got exposed to it, then we kind of got this movement that's starting. So I think with anything, it's like good product, right? Whether it's good food, good bourbon, good wine, good people. It's all about being exposed to those good things to understand that they are good and different and not what you're necessarily used to seeing all the time. So education and exposure are huge. It's a huge part of what made craft beer what it is. And it's a huge part of what's going to continue to make it. So when people say it's fancy, I love that because I like to give people the opportunity to try a bunch of different things and realize, listen, it's easy to make beer. It's not easy to make good beer. But with beer having people kind of equate fancy to wine. And I always joke, sort of joke, and I'm like, wine is, largely based on this one grape, or these grapes. It's like you grow this grape, this aspect, you crush the grape, you ferment the grape, you drink the juice, and that's kind of what it is. And you've got beer now that uses multiple ingredients that all have its own different flavor identities coming from thousands of different varietals for each one of those that all come together to provide something that pairs much better than wine with food and with occasional drink. And there's a lot of people that argue that, so I'm not going to take a hard stance. But it's just basically it's this entity, this thing that is made from multiple ingredients that allows an immense variety of flavors to come out of those ingredients to give people perspectives that are familiar to them depending on where they are, what they're doing, what they enjoy. So it's a lot more approachable from a palate perspective. I think it's a lot more diverse in general. Orange a brewer
Agreed.
personally.
No, I would follow that up with saying that, people tend to be creatures of habit. So they tend to, gravitate to what they're most familiar with. And more times than not, it's the larger establishments when it comes to beer. And, not knowing that there's an assimilation within the craft beer space that they can, enjoy, and it's quality and it's local, which is another benefit I feel is to support a local business, especially in the craft beer space. Like I can, drive 10, 12 miles and get a quality beer. I don't necessarily have to go to the grocery store and, buy a 30 pack of Bud Light or whatever your respective drink is to enjoy. You can get something in your own backyard that is, of same quality and same level of enjoyment. So I would agree that it's really just about, exposure and educating people that, there are good quality products right in your backyard that you can find and enjoy.
And Jamal, Oren told us how he got into first the brewery space and then the brewing space. For you, like, what is your beer backstory? How did you get into this work?
Um, so I think it's a big part of why I'm so passionate about trying to provide access into the industry now, because I got into the business. I was working at a Jewish deli in Vernon, and I was the only brother in that space as well. But it was like I got an internship with an Anheuser-Busch wholesaler. The VP of the wholesaler was a regular in my section all the time, and a nice guy, and thought I was a hard worker. And he came in on my 18th birthday and offered me an internship at the wholesalership that summer. And I actually blew it off. My mom was the one that forced me to call him, because she was like, "This is opportunity. This is why we moved to a white neighborhood, to find opportunity, and this is a great opportunity. Don't squander it." So I called him and got an internship that summer before going into college. So I was 18, and I had come home that next year, and they allowed me to continue my internship and stay full time. And then I ended up really falling in love with craft beer because a position opened up through Anheuser-Busch where they were really trying to, AB saw the writing on the wall that craft beer was starting to climb. So they were throwing a whole bunch of innovative products at the table, some that were craft-ish and craft-like. They had just bought Goose Island, and they were starting to kind of come into this space. And they wanted one person at every wholesaler focused on the innovative and craft side of the business. And everyone at the wholesaler was a bunch of older white dudes that were used to selling Bud and Bud Light, and they didn't want to have to learn something new. So I kind of got the position by default, and they actually told me that if it didn't work out with me taking the position, that they'd have to let me go, because I was underage. I couldn't drink the product. I was 20 when they had offered me the position. And so I went to about a dozen different training classes through Anheuser-Busch at different places that were like intense multi-day long training sessions about marketing to the demographic, understanding beer, sampling, sensory, and all the aspects that came with that. But I had to pass the exams on the test without actually being able to sample the product. And I think that actually made me fall more in love with it, because through sensory and smelling and visuals and the information, I just was like, wow, this is not Bud Light. This is a different thing. This is really, really cool. This really does smell like chocolate and roasted malt. And this does smell like these hops are citrusy and big. And it was more than just bitterness to me. And then I got into this. I just fell in love with it, went down the rabbit hole, and then got into it. And then when I really got into it, I made the transition to work for a small brewery at the time, Blue Point Brewing Company out of Long Island. I was their first sales rep outside of New York. And he kind of took a chance on me because they were coming into the state. I was the only one at the wholesaler that knew anything about craft beer and cared about it. And it was an opportunity to kind of build something more or less from the ground up. And the culture was completely different than Anheuser-Busch, where Anheuser-Busch was very brand loyal, corporate kind of energy, big drinking culture, but very corporate in the sense. And he was like, you drink Anheuser-Busch products or you don't work here type of thing. And craft beer was a complete opposite. It was this like this open-minded, laid back, kind of bootstrap, scrappy industry where everybody drank each other's beer and helped each other with things they needed and shared ingredients if they needed. And I remember riding with the owner of Blue Point on my very first ride with when he came into the territory. And we went to an account. I was all excited about showing him this new account that I'd gotten, and we were going to drink our beer at that account. And it was this place called the Ginger Man. I don't know if you remember it. There was one in Norwalk, and they had 100 different beers on tap. And I was excited to be like, all right, we got toasted lager on in here. And we sat down and he's like, hey man, we know what our beer tastes like. Let's try all these other beers. And it was like, blew my mind as to riding around with the owner of a company that was like wanted to drink other beers than what we sold and made. And it was just a whole different culture. And I just fell in love with everything about it. And I've been riding it. So that's kind of, I guess my long-winded come up story. That's all I got here.
I love that. I love that. It's I love a long-winded story. It's and I think that's great. And
I say that to say also, sorry, I was in a very white space that provided me access into this industry that I wouldn't have had access into otherwise. A lot of people that get into the craft beer side, working for a brewery as a sales rep, especially, it's usually because a lot of times, I should say, it's you work at a restaurant and you're a bartender and you know the wholesaler rep that comes in, or you know the family that owns the wholesaler, because most wholesalers are family owned, or you are working at a liquor store or a package store. You've got some sort of front of house exposure experience into the industry that kind of that relationship between them has kind of segued into it. And you usually work for a wholesaler first, and then because you're working at a wholesaler, you've got access to these breweries, and then you can kind of transition into a brewery, which is exactly how I got in. And then my story is not very unique to a lot of other people that are in the industry now. But those are all white spaces, and those are all spaces where you need to be front of house in a white space to kind of have those relationships or even the exposure to know that this is even a thing that you can do. So for us, when we talk about collaborating with other events and Black and brown communities that already exist, bringing craft beer into Black culture and into Black spaces, creating new spaces itself, it's about changing what the access and the exposure looks like in order to know that this industry exists, that opportunities exist, and certainly the segue into actually getting into the industry itself.
So I do want to talk about how folks can support before we run out of time, but I also just want to talk about the fact that there is also a beer, like an eponymously named beer now, right? Change in the Air. It's a tropical blonde ale with mango, which sounds delicious. And it is coming out of Lawson's Finest Liquids and a collaboration between them and Nebco. And so my understanding is the proceeds go directly to the foundation.
Yep. The Lawson's has been very generous. They've been great partners with us since we kicked this off. The local sales rep is a good friend of mine, Joey Orsini. Shout out to Joe, who helped kind of put this all together. Him and I came up in the business together. We used to work at that Anheuser-Busch wholesaler back in the day together. So it's great to kind of have us on two different sides of the brewery to be able to come together and make this collaboration. But yes, the proceeds go directly to the Change in the Air Foundation, and in which in turn goes directly to our African American Brewer Scholarship, the endowment fund that we are fundraising for.
And I will say this, like, beautiful. I'm looking at the can right now. The beautiful can is designed by our own Dulio.
Yes, ma'am.
With his like pretty signature graffiti. I feel like this is pretty signaturely him. And you got some mangoes, you got some people who look like they're just drinking beer and having a good time and maybe listening to some good music. So that's great. So if folks are hearing this, how can they support the foundation? And then of course, if folks are hearing this, how can they attend on October 14th? I think theirs is at 470 James Street, but we will check that before the end of the episode.
Correct.
And from noon to 5 p.m., come out and support you, because yes, this is about beer and craft brewing, but this is also about the scholarship and making sure that folks are able to go through this program.
Exactly. So there's multiple ways they can support us. One, they can buy a ticket to the Change in the Air Fest. That's a great way. Two, they can go to our website, changeintheairfest.com, and there's a link there to buy a ticket. We're selling the tickets through Eventbrite, so you can go directly to Eventbrite. or you can go to our website. There's also a section on our website where you can donate. If you want to just make a donation to the scholarship, you can do that directly from our website. Make it real easy. A couple of button clicks. But also, you can support us through our Instagram and Facebook, of course, Changing the Air Fest. But most importantly, of course, donating to the scholarship or buying a ticket to the festival or pulling up at Cedar Park, which is happening next Saturday. It's kind of our little pre-Changing the Air Festival event. We're giving away tickets to Changing the Air at that event. But you can also, there'll be plenty of opportunity to QR codes and stuff to just donate and help support the cause. We have $250,000 to raise. We are about $110,000 into that fundraising so far. This is year 3. We set that goal for 5 years. And shout out to, we didn't say it yet, but shout out to Athletic Brewing, because Athletic Brewing, when we first started our annual scholarship, they reached out to me directly and were like, hey, we love what you're doing. We'd love to add another $15,000 a year to help you put 2 students a year through that program. So since we've started this, we've actually put 6 students in total through the program, 4 of which are working in the industry now, which is just dope. 2 of which are Black women, including this year's NEBCO scholarship recipient. I'm sorry, 3 of which are Black women. So we have, so shout out to Athletic. They're also our main stage sponsor for the festival. They help us actually make this festival a reality. And also shout out to Lawson's and our other beer sponsors, Lawson's, Athletic, Alvarium, Two Roads, Gray Sail, Kit Brewing, Allagash, and of course NEBCO being our title sponsor, have all put some dollars up, put their money where their mouth is to help us make this thing an actual festival, because festivals are expensive and you can't do it without support. And of course, in the city of New Haven, they gave us a really big grant this year to help make this a reality, and also is giving us the means to help execute and make Cedar Park a real thing as well.
Yeah, that's awesome. So if folks don't check you out, really, they have no excuse. That's really
No
what we're saying. And I mean, what I also love about the Change in the Air Festival, so obviously, yes, this is about craft beer and craft brewing and getting folks into it. But if you don't drink, there's still stuff for you to do there. And I will also say, for folks who haven't experienced athletic brewing yet, please experience it. Also experience NEBCO, and everything in between, and Rhythm Brewing. We love Elisa Bowens. If you're listening, Elisa, we love you so much, and we're excited for everything that you do. She's not only one of my favorite brewers, but also one of my favorite salseras. So just a really talented woman.
She'll be doing a salsa lesson at Cedar Park, and she also sets a board for the festivals for the foundation as well. So
yes, so folks, check that out. Cedar Park on September 30th, and the Change in the Air Festival on Saturday, October 14th, from noon to 5 p.m. That's a big, beautiful window of time. You can go at the beginning, you can go near the end, you can go anytime in between. You got 5 whole hours at Bear Smokehouse and Barbecue. That's at 470 James Street in New Haven's Mill River District. The final question I always ask folks is, you're doing a lot. Planning a festival is a lot of work, on top of the fact that you have jobs. So how do you unwind, or how do you practice self-care?
It's a good question. Meditation, truly, and meditative chores. Like for one being, I spend a lot of time in my garden. Actually, as corny as that may sound, that helps level my head and balance, because it's easy to burn the candle at both ends. Being the director of sales and marketing here at NEBCO, while trying to lead and run a nonprofit, and plan these events, it's easy to go crazy and stress myself out. And shout out to my wife who has to deal with me losing sleep and getting up early to be in the garden and make sure I got that mental space. So that's how I make it all work, but it's working.
Yeah, and that doesn't sound cheesy, by the way. Gardening is therapeutic. Oren, what about you?
I would say the same. Meditation, yoga are my top 2. And then I don't have a garden. I have houseplants that I tend to, which is, just as much of an ordeal. I mean, definitely on a smaller scale, not a homestead or anything, but I do spend quite a bit of time of repotting, pruning, propagating. So a lot of time doing that, and then really just time with the family. just to, kind of relax, revive, and, receive that energy from the ones who know me best is really a good benefit as well for myself.
Yeah, you mentioned Hartford. Is your family still around like the Hartford area?
Yeah, majority of my family is in the Hartford
Cool.
area. I do have some scattered throughout the Connecticut area and other regions of the area, but my main core family is here in the Hartford, Bloomfield, Windsor area.
Amazing. And I will say, because we're going into the weekend, if both of you had a beer that is not coming out of your respective breweries that you think, folks have to try in the spirit, Jamal, of trying other folks' beers, what would it be?
I drink anything that's good, especially if it's not beer. I don't care who's making it.
That is so diplomatic. I love that.
Yeah.
I guess I'm going to be a little biased and say if I have a go-to, it's probably going to be a Sea Hag IPA. But I mean, and that's because I had one last night. So, respectively, that is a bit of a go-to for myself. Tried and true. It doesn't deviate from, the first time I've had it. So it's definitely a solid one for me.
Amazing. I want to thank both of you so much for joining me today on Arts Respond on WNHHLP 103.5 FM New Haven. When we share this episode, we will share out the way to get tickets for the Change in the Air Festival on October 14th. We'll share out the CETA pop-up that's happening on September 30th. And if you haven't read it, but you're interested in reading a little bit more about this, there is an article in the arts paper at newhavenarts.org about the city's allocation of ARPA funds for different arts and cultural projects, including the Change in the Air Festival. So do check that out. And I don't know if you feel like shouting out Adrienne Jefferson because she's just an amazing city official. Today's always, really any day is a good day to do it.
Oh yes, shout out, double that.
Orin Ferris and
For
Jamal
sure.
Robinson, thank you so much for joining me and have a beautiful weekend. Don't get wet. It's supposed to be very soggy.
Thanks for having us and thanks for highlighting this.
Oh,
Appreciate you.
you
Thank you
bet.
for your time.
Take
Appreciate it
care.
very much. You as well.
Stop, sir. Good night.